Welcome to the Couple to Couple League PeakDay podcast, where we talk about fertility and natural family planning with our friends. Today's guests are Mary Jo and John Thayer. John and Mary Jo met in high school and married 3 months after Mary Jo graduated college. They learned the symptothermal method of NFP on their own and attribute the practice of it to their great communication and strong commitment to faith and family. In 1987, they became a promoter couple for CCL, giving talks to engaged couples as well as to those exploring the Catholic faith. John, a Lutheran, converted in 1994 after attending a talk with a friend on Humanae Vitae. Being convicted of the great work of Couple to Couple League, they have made CCL one of their main charities for the first 40 years of their marriage. Mary Jo became a local theology of the body writer and speaker and writes fictional novels that incorporate TOB and NFP themes into her books. The Thayers, now retired, split their time between Michigan and Florida and enjoy golf, pickleball, hosting gatherings, and traveling. Thank you, John and Mary Jo, for being on the PeakDay podcast.
Thanks for having us, Martha. We're happy to be here.
Wonderful. You guys have been active with CCL for a long, long time, and we appreciate so much our promoters. Every little bit helps, and it's people like you who have, really helped spread the word about natural family planning. So let's just talk about how you guys met. You guys have been friends since high school, and then you got married right out of college. What do you think? What kind of advantage has that given you as a married couple?
Well, kind of interestingly, it's alleviated, we kind of grew up together. So we were able to form together. But interestingly, it also led us to a parenting approach where we did not allow our children to date in high school, even though we did. So they thought that was maybe a little hypocritical in the beginning, but as they grew older, they saw the wisdom in it, and they're all now happily married. And, it'll be interesting to see how they handle their kids as they get into the teenage years. So, and it's, been an advantage just from that perspective of we've been friends forever. So it's everything we've grown, everything we've experienced it together.
So John, I mentioned in the intro that you were raised Lutheran, and Mary Jo, you were raised Catholic. So was your difference in your faith backgrounds any kind of obstacle for you especially when you were preparing for marriage?
No, not really that I realized anyway.
Okay.
I think that, subsequently I understood a little bit more about marriages where you have a full mass, and we didn't because I was not Catholic, but I didn't realize it at the time. So it seemed smooth to me, but,
And smooth to me as well, because I was a Catholic. I was going to get married in the church. I was going to raise my children Catholic. There really wasn't ever any doubt in my mind. And John was good with that. I remember my student teaching supervisor, we had become friends. He just took me under his wing, and he said, well, what would happen if John did not want to get married in the Catholic Church or raise your children Catholic? And I said, we would break up. And he kind of stood back and he said, wow, that's really important to you. And I said, it's just the way it is, but we are. So, worked out.
So John, you maybe, I'm not sure if it's if you're a little ahead of your time or not, but you're really interested in living a natural life and all things very healthy. How do you think that translated into wanting to practice natural family planning in your marriage?
Yeah, I think for me it really was what the foundation of my buy-in was, and it was an aspect of that came out of the early 70s oil embargo, where I got interested in solar energy and alternative energies because I saw how much that affected my extended family who all worked for General Motors, that type of thing. And so I really got into organic gardening and studied alternative energy and wanted to live that natural, healthy life. One of the tensions that Mary Jo had before I asked her to marry me was whether I was going to want to go live in a cabin in Alaska and live off of the land. But even though that was kind of a romantic dream, it wasn't ever a reality in my mind.
Okay.
But, and in conjunction with that, like barrier methods all seemed gross to me and non intimate, just
Mm-hmm.
from common sense. And
Mm-hmm.
I, so it was easy to buy in from that perspective. It wasn't,
Okay.
I didn't completely understand at the time the theological or moral implications of
Mm-hmm.
contraceptives, but I didn't want to use them.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't understand all the theology yet either.
Right. Right. And Mary Jo, had you were you familiar with like tracking your cycles, or were you familiar with NFP at all, or did you just know you did not want to use contraceptives in your
I,
marriage?
I just knew I didn't want to. I think
Mm-hmm.
my mother, who was born in 1918, and she might have been a little ahead of her time in trying to help me.
Mm-hmm.
I just knew it was against the church.
Mm-hmm.
I it's almost like emotionally I understood that, intellectually I had to grow in that.
Sure.
I just knew, see, she consecrated me to the Blessed Virgin at my birth. She almost
Oh.
died, and I was going to be named Carolyn, who ends up being the main character in my book. But so they named me
Mm.
Mary Jo. She just told my dad, we have to give her a better name. And so she consecrated me to the Blessed Virgin. And
Oh.
so I had that grace just
Yeah.
as a gift to me my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
even though I questioned the church maybe in some of my youth,
Mm-hmm.
I was going to be an obedient Catholic. I
Okay.
There was no other way for me. And so I appreciated John's perspective on it because I was just
Right.
obedient no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
I just figured the church was right.
Do you remember
Right.
how we first found out about CCL?
Yes, I read it in our church bulletin.
Okay.
One of the
Oh.
earliest teaching couples, the Witkowskis, happened to go to our parish and had advertised in the bulletin. I was
Okay.
so naive that I thought natural family planning was equivalent to Planned Parenthood. I mean, I was just very, very naive. I heard the word parent.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought,
Right.
well, I should learn about how to plan my parenthood. And then, of
Uh-huh.
course, I got to the first meeting in their home. John couldn't attend, and I paid them and I gathered the materials. And then I realized or learned later what Planned Parenthood really was, and I was aghast. But
Okay.
that shows my youth, right?
Yeah.
And not
Right.
complete
Yes.
teaching either in my
Mm.
Catholic school or in my home. And
Yeah.
so
Right.
we learned the
Mm-hmm.
method. It was fairly easy to learn. It was fairly
Okay.
easy to apply. John found it very good to look at my charts and my temperatures and kind of exciting. And, there we go.
So, your part in the charting and tracking was like doing the detail work, John, and she was just Mary Jo was giving you like signs and symptoms and things.
Um, she generally filled it out because I was,
Okay.
sometimes gone to work or that type of thing. But
Okay.
we both referred to it and talked about, where we were at in the
Yeah.
cycle. And
Right. Right.
so it was, as CCL is always communicated, it forces communication
Right.
versus not.
Right.
Sometimes sexual relations are instead of communicating in couples that
Right.
don't understand the connection between emotional
Mm-hmm.
intimacy and physical intimacy and spiritual intimacy.
Right.
So it ends up being in essence, uh, a distraction instead of actually communicating.
Right.
And
Right.
I'm blessed to have married a great communicator who loved me to such a degree that to accept the faith, to accept this,
Mm-hmm.
and what it was for me, he was just all in from the beginning and never
Yeah.
wavered.
So you said you discovered CCL in a parish bulletin, and then you took you taught yourself the method basically. So why was it that you chose CCL to be like one of your main charitable contributions throughout your marriage?
For me, when they would send the print version of the CCL Family Foundations, I read that thing like a Bible. I
Yeah.
just could relate to the people in it. It was my motivation, or one of my motivations, to keep going with the method, to learn more.
Mm,
The
mm,
family life presented, the marriage life that was presented,
yeah.
seemed sacrificial and holy, but also so rich and so complete,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, that I just kind of fell in love with the whole CCL thing.
Oh,
Yeah, and I
yeah.
think that I read CCL Foundation as well, and it was always a good read. And
Sure.
I prefer reading magazines versus books. It takes
Yeah.
too long to read a book, type of thing.
Yeah.
And I think CCL fit in. That led to us getting involved in a local chapter once we moved
Okay.
back to Michigan, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And meeting people in the CCL chapter, we
Mm-hmm.
found a lot of commonality. And
Okay.
that another connection of why we chose it as a charity and not
Mm-hmm.
only a group to be involved in
Sure.
is that it's, as we looked at society and talked about society, we wanted to be part of things that address the root of issues, not the patching of some symptom of what's going on in
Mm,
society. So
yeah.
at the
Yeah.
root of, you know, having babies and making those decisions is much closer to bringing people to a a view of the world that's bigger than themselves, and that's such a
Mm,
battle in society.
right.
Is hey, the world's pretty much about me, or pretty close to whether I'm happy or not. So
Mm,
CCL is at the root, and even
okay.
though it's a huge mountain to climb,
Yeah.
doesn't you still have to go at the root versus just at
Right.
the
Right.
symptom at the top of the mountain.
So it seems like you found kind of like your tribe, your support group. Did you have any like family members or any other friends that were practicing natural family planning? Was that an issue for you guys, or were there people questioning your method of planning your family?
We had no family that
Mm,
that we knew of that was faithful to the church in that way.
mhm,
Um,
mhm,
I did speak about it with a couple of members close to my age. I think one of them took a class series, but ultimately made other decisions. Um,
mhm,
so our friends, we had tons of support from our friends. And then
yeah,
we would
yeah,
attend, we didn't go to the CCL conventions every other year. We went every 4 years,
okay,
but we really got fed there and met
Uh,
more people. And
right,
that was our support system, each other, the church, of
mhm,
course,
mhm,
and then CCL in the chapter groups and at large.
and we didn't
right,
have anyone who was negative about what we were
mhm,
doing, or
mhm.
maybe even
Well, good,
didn't
yeah,
really weren't concerned or interested, from a
okay,
family perspective. I have two sisters and a brother, and we were from the same, since we met in high school. Our families were from the same city, and
right,
so we had great family relationships. And
sure,
generally, people were happy when we announced we were having another baby. So, Mary
yeah,
Jo comes from a family of eight, so
right.
it's we used to people having
Right.
families.
So at what point did you both decide that becoming NFP promoters was something that you really wanted to do?
I think I yearned to be connected in a deeper way. We moved from Virginia, where I had started to write articles for our church bulletin, but we had to drive almost 40 minutes to get to a Catholic church where I was teaching in Virginia, a very rural county. So when we moved to the Detroit area, that's how I found some friends. And so I got involved there, and we wanted to be involved. And they had monthly meetings, and it made sense. Maybe I leaned toward becoming a teaching couple. John wasn't feeling that at the time, but he was all about promoting and giving talks and going to meetings and hosting picnics. And
Yeah, we had talked about becoming a teaching couple, but just due to where we were at from, life and work, and just decided that promoting would fit us better.
Do you want to talk about that a little bit, John, about your conversion? And
well, one of the things that perhaps kept me from making the decision was I felt that I would be a little bit betraying my mom because she had raised us Lutheran, and now I'm going to change to become Catholic. So I was very anxious about telling my parents. And then when I did tell them, my mom was like, "Oh, that's awesome." And my dad's like, "About time." And I'm like, "Whoa, man, this is supposed to be difficult." But
I waited for this.
and my dad had been raised Catholic, so he went through Catholic high school, but then they decided to raise us Lutheran. And so, Mary Jo mentioned, or you mentioned in the introduction, that I went to hear a speaker, Monsignor Stoutenberg, at a local church. And the theme of his discussion, the essence, was that the truth never changes.
Okay.
And for whatever reason, all of the experiences and learning that I'd done just by going to talks and doing things, that's what cemented it, was the truth never changes, which makes, for a great beacon in your life, is that, the truth doesn't change. And that includes, with regard to marriage and reproduction and having babies, is, hey, the truth doesn't change. So that's what cemented it. And then moved forward and went through RCIA and converted.
Okay. So I want to talk, Mary Jo, about your writing and how that got started. It sounded like you started writing for your church bulletin, and then did that kind of blossom into your writing your novels, or did something happen that really set you off on writing?
Well, I've got to say, we went to a CCL convention when Christopher West was just about to graduate, or had just graduated from the Institute.
Okay.
And John and I at the conventions, he would go hear one talk and I'd go hear another one, and then we'd get back together. So we got two talks, right? So I had gone to hear Chris West, and I was just mesmerized. It blew my socks off, but then it resonated so deeply. And I always had this call to chastity, and being a high school teacher, even way back in the day, I really tried to help my students feel the call to chastity in whatever way that I could, by the way that I lived my life, or if they would come in my classroom, and I would try to help them. And that was it. I then knew it had changed my personal and professional life. I then knew I was raising kids and what I was supposed to be doing. And so I immediately came home and wrote the article, Chastity 101 for Parents. And that got published by CCL and by our local faith magazine. And then I developed a talk on chastity that, believe it or not, my first speaking engagement was at an evangelical high school, a Protestant high school. And I was talking to the administrators about chastity and how do we help these kids, and that it was different than abstinence, and they really bought in, and they said, we'd like you to do a talk. And they taped it. They found out later that I was a Catholic, and I never got asked back. But that tape was reproduced and given out. And then Catholic Church got wind. I would often do question and answers for women's groups at different parishes who were meeting. They would ask me to come in, and then from there it was youth groups and youth retreats and that kind of thing. And then I spent 5 summers studying theology of the body with a group of women. A deacon's wife took the lead on that, and we read everything. And John was injured, and I had to go back to work.
Well, you had started writing like Mom with a Message somewhere in there?
Yes, I had little articles, Confessions of a Homeschooler, Mom with a Message. So I kind of started a little thing. And then when John was injured, I went back to work and substitute taught and ended up teaching moral theology at Lansing Catholic High School. We moved to Grand Rapids. John had been commuting for a long time. Our last son graduated. I taught 1 more year. I spoke on the Capitol steps when the HHS mandate came down. And then I moved to Grand Rapids, and I spoke at Fortnight for Freedom, and I started a women's group. And all of a sudden, this novel that I think was born out of something that happened to a friend in high school. The book isn't about her. It's about all of the teenagers I ever taught and all of the stories I'd ever heard. Close to the Soul was born. It took me 7 years to figure out how to write a novel. And when I submitted it, when I queried, I got like 36 or 8 rejections. And I queried it to Ellen Gable at Full Quiver. And she said, the story is intriguing, but it is a mess. You don't know how to write a novel, but the story's there. And I want the story. Here's what you need to do. You'll have 3 months to do it, and then we'll see if you get a contract.
Wow.
So I did it. I did the work. She wrote back, wow, you can write a book and you can take direction. We'd be proud to publish Close to the Soul. So in 2021, that book was published. And it's done well. It's won 3 literary awards, and I think it's a good seller still.
And you are working on a sequel to it. It's a 3-part series. Is that correct?
I think it is going to be a 3-part series. I wasn't going to do that, but then God said I was, so I did. Yes, I just finished the giant edits where you have to cut all of your darlings out, and just sent that back to Full Quiver this morning.
Wow.
The title of the second book is Running Out of Sand. It is about the older brother of Carolyn Fandel, my main character. As the older brother, he feels like he should be the protector. He's had some tragedy in his life where he hasn't been able to protect people he cared about. And then he makes his own choices, which are not that great. And essentially, he ends up using alcohol to cope. So it's a story about how alcohol, can really wreck a really good guy and his journey through that.
Yeah.
And then the third story will be about a post-abortive woman who fell into some things with men in her family early on in her age. I think at least that's, I don't know what that's going to be called yet, but after my first novel was out, a woman met with me and really told me, you must write Phyllis Norton's story because I am Phyllis.
Oh.
And so
she was in your first novel.
But we'll see if that happens. I'm heading towards 66, so we'll see how much of these novels I got left in me. But I've still got some gumption.
Well, like I said, we will have to speak with you about when your second novel comes out. We'll go more in depth.
Well, and I'm very grateful to CCL and their support. They put my first novel in their catalog.
Oh,
so
okay.
Right away,
wow.
they put it in the CCL catalog of books. I don't know if it's still there. I haven't checked in a bit, but I was very grateful for that because there is TOB and NFP connections and everything that I wrote.
Exactly. So you both speak with engaged couples and even those that are exploring the Catholic faith. Are you able to incorporate natural family planning into those talks that you give those
Yeah,
couples?
always.
Yep. And we've done that in different formats. I mean, we've been part of our parish's marriage prep has been one way, or we
Okay.
have been asked to be guest speakers at some other parishes' marriage prep. Um, as promoters, we were involved in organizing different examples of witnesses to NFP.
Mm.
And that was, remember where that was?
No, yeah, it was at a little country church, St. Mary and Morris, but we invited all the priests and deacons of the diocese. And we had different couples talk about their conversions or to the method or different things like that. And John and I were the MCs for that event. And we had about 60 priests and
Wow.
deacons attend. It was
And
well attended.
Yeah.
and video recorded it, and there was a great variety of people who were like post contraception,
Sure.
infertility issues, who
Okay.
use some of what CCL educates people about to get through their process and rediscovered
Right.
the beauty of the marital embrace. And
Mm-hmm.
so there was, we've done some effective things in that way, but marriage prep is a great one.
Right.
And
Right.
when each of our children became engaged to be married, we offered the CCL class as an engagement gift to each one of them.
Right. Right. That's a beautiful thing. How impactful is it for a priest to be knowledgeable about natural family planning for the couples that they're preparing for marriage?
I think the priests, it's essential for
Yeah.
them to weave TOB into their homilies and to
Mm.
understand the method and to be
Mm-hmm.
able to help couples along that path, maybe even
Yeah.
require a class series. And I think it's hard for priests because they aren't married, but they grew up in marriages. And so
Yes.
I think a lot
Yes.
of couples believe or feel that priests really don't have anything to say about what goes on in the bedroom.
Right.
But if our spiritual fathers can't lead us down the right path, how
Mm-hmm.
are they going to follow the path of God the Father?
Oh,
And
yeah.
so I believe priests can do that, but they also need help from couples who are
Yes.
willing to work the battleground with them
Right.
on that
Right.
couple to couple. That's what's so beautiful
Mm-hmm.
about couple to couple is
Yeah.
John can speak to the men. I believe women can speak to women and sometimes
Mm-hmm.
men, but I think men can
Mm-hmm.
speak to both women and men. I think men can speak to the heart of both genders. And
Hmm.
so I think it's essential.
So, John, when you are speaking with men, do they have different concerns than maybe the women do? What are your
I think the
experiences with them?
challenge with men is getting them comfortable and confident enough to actually voice any concern. They listen in rather you don't know what they're thinking.
They're
Mm-hmm.
often quite
So
passive.
it's, I think it's a
Mm-hmm.
challenge because it hadn't really come up as something formative until they were thinking about getting engaged.
Yes.
Where a lot of other, like abortion, for example, comes up in life
Yeah.
more broadly than natural family planning does. So I think
Mm-hmm.
that, it takes men a bit to, dig into it unless they're, have already been very deep into that type of thing, which isn't the majority.
Yeah.
So it's not that I've heard different concerns, but more of you can generally get a sense of whether they're really listening.
So, what is it that you like the most about teaching and sharing NFP with couples?
I like that personal connection. I care very deeply about God's people.
Hmm.
And I don't want anyone to be separated from him. And so I want to bring them together with the Lord. And when that happens, it's very beautiful.
And I think another beneficial aspect of talking to couples and engaging with other CCL members is one, it's just gratifying, but also gets us re-engaged in what we're going to talk about. You know, helps reinforce our center and remember things that we hadn't been thinking about consciously. You know, life is busy, right? Life takes on all of these things. So it was good to, hey, we're meeting with so and so and so and so on Tuesday. What do we, you know, let's review what we're going to talk to them about and how we might do it. Was good for us and good for our marriage. So there was some, you know, direct benefit back to us as well.
Can you give us some words of encouragement for couples who you think might be good for promoting or maybe even teaching NFP or even TOB?
I think, you know, an encouragement is, it is one of the best ways to make friends with people that are striving for the same things that you are, from not only just natural family planning, but also faith in general, family in general, society more broadly. And you gain more fortitude when you know there's a lot of other people who are marching on your same path or trying as best they can. So it's, you know, choose the easier path to find those things, and CCL is one of those.
Along with that, for me, or in addition to that, my hunch is, in most couples who are really all in this NFP and following the church, one of them at one point will have a stirring in their conscience and in their hearts to maybe get more involved. So I would just encourage people, if you are that spouse, whether you're the husband or the wife, and you're feeling this, and maybe you've talked about it before, but just encourage you to risk the vulnerability and find a way to phrase it again to your spouse, or as one spouse or the other. It doesn't prevent you personally from getting involved. And my thinking is, as a Catholic moral theology teacher, if we don't do this, if people with an inkling or a nudging don't answer their conscience and follow through with the Holy Spirit, who's going to? I remember when I was asked to speak at the Capitol, I was very nervous. I had never done anything that large scale. And I was telling my students about it, how I didn't quite know if I was qualified. And one of my students just raised his hand, it was a man, and said, "Mrs. Thayer, I'm going to speak back to you your own words that you've been teaching us all year. If Catholics don't speak up, who's going to speak up?"
Oh.
And I just said, "Okie dokie." And then,
done deal, right?
And then I did it, you know, but
yeah,
it was wonderful.
Yes.
It's a pleasure being involved with CCL and knowing CCL for so many years.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
Near and dear to our hearts.
Yeah, there are a lot of couples like you who have been around almost from the very beginning, who are still, you know, supporting Couple to Couple League in, you know, many different ways, you know, promoting, teaching, you know, contributing and, you know, supporting us that way. So what you have done for, you know, the last 40 plus years has been a blessing to us and a blessing to all the couples that you have reached. So thank you very much too.
It's our pleasure, our blessing.
So thank you, John and Mary Jo Thayer, for being on the PeakDay podcast.
Thanks for having us. Enjoyed it, Martha. Thank you.